Welcome back. This is episode number 5 of the Limitation Act. We have considered section 3, and while dealing with section 3, some other provisions in the Code of Civil Procedure are relevant for consideration. I will say the same. Please note. Order 7, Rule 6. Order 7 relates to plaint. Order 7, Rule 6 and Order 7, Rule 11D, small d. Let us see Order 7, Rule 6. Where the suit is instituted after the expiration of the period prescribed by the law for the law of limitation, the plaintiff shall show the ground upon which exemption from such law is claimed. Provided that the court may permit the plaintiff to claim exemption from the law of limitation on any ground not set out in the plaint, if such ground is not inconsistent with the grounds set out in the plaint. So, even though we have seen the wording expression, even though limitation has not been set up as a defense. Now, we will see what are the necessary averments to be made in the plaint. I said about acknowledgement. Normally on the face of the plaint, it is barred by time. Promissory note 1/1/2020, suit is filed in February 2023. That means on the face of it is barred by time. The plaintiff is relying on an acknowledgement of liability. Thereby he gets a fresh period of limitation from that date, which he has to plead. That is what is contained in Order 7, Rule 6. Order 7, Rule 11D, 11 rejection of plaint. The plaint shall be rejected in the following cases. D, where the suit appears from the statement in the plaint to be barred by any law. Then the plaint shall be rejected. If the suit appears from the statement in the plaint to be barred by any law. So, what is a statement in the plaint? The defendant executed a promissory note on 1/1/2020. Suit is filed on February 15th, 2023. On the statement in the plaint itself, it is barred by limitation. So, even though the limitation has not been set up as a defense by the defendant, it is the duty of the court to dismiss it. But if the plaintiff wants to rely on an acknowledgement under 18 or a payment under 19 or any other exemptions or exclusions, he has to plead it. That is what is contained in Order 7, Rule 6. Now, the other provisions which are relevant is written statement, that is Order 8, Rule 2. Order 8, Rule 2, what is that? New facts must be specifically pleaded. The defendant must raise by his pleading all matters which show the suit to not to be maintainable, or that the transaction is either void or voidable in point of law. And all such grounds of defense as if not raised would be likely to take the opposite party by surprise, or would raise issues of fact not arising out of the plaint. This is important. Or would raise issues of fact not arising out of the plaint, as for instance fraud, limitation, release, payment, performance, or facts showing illegality. This must be pleaded. Then what is the meaning of section 3, even though limitation is not set up as a defense? So, something is said in the plaint about it. You are controverting it in the written statement in defense. It must find a place in the written statement. Then only the court can raise an issue on that and decide it. Then set off. Order 8, Rule 6. Order 8, Rule 6. Counterclaim Order 8, Rule 6A to 6G, capital 6A to 6G. These are the provisions which we have to consider along with section 3 of the Limitation Act. Then it will be complete. Then I said, in the case of a pauper, for the purpose of this act, a suit is instituted in the case of a pauper when his application for leave to sue as a pauper is made. Along with this, you have to see section 13 of the Limitation Act and also Rule 15 capital A of Order 33. Order 33, Rule 15 capital A. Let me see. Yes, 15 capital A. That was inserted by the 1976 amendment. Now let us see what is 13 of the Limitation Act. 1.3. Exclusion of time in cases where leave to sue or appeal as a pauper is applied for. In computing the period of limitation prescribed for any suit or appeal, in any case where an application for leave to sue or appeal as a pauper has been made and rejected, the time during which the applicant has been prosecuting in good faith his application for such leave shall be excluded, and the court may, on payment of the court fee prescribed for such suit or appeal, treat the suit or appeal as having the same force and effect as if court fee has been paid in the first instance. So, for computing the period of limitation for the purpose of filing of a suit, the time during which the plaintiff has been prosecuting with due diligence an application under Order 33 or Order 44, as the case may be, for the suit and appeal shall be excluded. That is what is contained in section 13 of the Limitation Act. That is to be read along with section 3(2)(a). 3(2) I shall check up. (3)(2)(a) subclause 2. Now, Rule 15(a) of Order 33, which says that on payment of the suit shall be deemed to have been, I am not reading the whole thing, the suit shall be where an application has been made under Order 33 or Order 44, Order 33, and it has been rejected for leave to file the suit as a pauper is dismissed. The suit and on payment of the court fee, the suit shall be deemed to have been instituted on the date on which the application for permission to sue as an indigent person was presented. So that is to be read along with 3(2)(a) subclause 2. 3(2)(a) of subclause 2 of clause A of the Limitation Act. So then that scheme will be complete. It is not only one provision in the Limitation Act that is relevant, there are connected provisions which also we have to bear in mind. Now we will go to some of the decisions under section 3. An obligation is cast upon the court by section 3 to dismiss the suit, appeal or application if it is barred by limitation. Though limitation is not pleaded in the written statement, the suit is liable to be dismissed if it is barred by limitation. AER 1970 Supreme Court 716. AER 1970 Supreme Court 716. It was also held there that absence of the plea of limitation will not cause prejudice to the plaintiff, and that the plea of limitation can be raised even at the appellate stage. See AIR 1964 Supreme Court 1336. Now we have seen in section 3 opening, subject to the provisions contained in sections 4 to 24. What does it mean? Does it mean that all the provisions of 4 to 24 will have to be applied in each and every case? That is not the meaning. It does not mean that all the provisions of 4 to 24 will be attracted to every case. For instance, section 5 is not applicable to suits. So whichever provision is applicable, that has to be applied, and that is what is contained in subject to the provisions of sections 4 to 24, wherever it applies. For the appeal, section 5 applies, or application other than an application under order 21 of the Code of Civil Procedure, section 5 applies. So that wherever it is applicable, it is subject to that. Then section 3 of the Limitation Act and section 151 of the Code of Civil Procedure. For invoking the inherent power of the court under section 151, no period of limitation is provided. No period of limitation is there. And section 3 of the Limitation Act is not attracted to such an application. I think I have cited LS Synthetics Limited Case 2004-11 SEC, 2011-4 SEC, 456. Sorry. Para 33 of LS Synthetics. Then section 3 is to be applied only to courts and no other bodies such as quasi-judicial tribunals or executive authority. AIR 1970 Supreme Court 209 and LS Synthetics 2004-11 SEC 456, and then MP Steel, which I said in the earlier episode. All those decisions I have given to you. Please note that. Now, is the question of limitation a question of law or a mixed question of law in fact? Both. It is a question of law and it is also a mixed question of fact and law. When the question of limitation is purely one of law, capable of determination on the facts admitted or proved before court, the court is bound to raise the question suo motu and decide it. That is the wording of section 3. The application made after the prescribed period shall be dismissed. Suit, appeal or application made after the prescribed period shall be dismissed, although limitation has not been set up as a defense. So the question of limitation is purely one of law, capable of determination on the facts admitted or proved before court. The court is bound to raise the question suo motu and decide it. But where the question of limitation raises issues of facts not arising from the plaint, the defendant is bound under Rule 2 of Order 8 to raise such question in his written statement. I said about Rule 2 of Order 8, where it is required where the question of law or question of limitation raises issues of facts not arising from the plaint, the defendant is bound under Order 8 Rule 2 CPC to raise such question in his written statement. However, if the facts proved or admitted show that the suit or other proceeding does not seem to be barred, the court is not bound to raise the question of limitation because it is not bound to speculate upon possible questions of limitation. I said about the acknowledgement, whether the acknowledgement is valid, whether the defendant signed it, all those things, unless pleaded, how can the court decide it? So all those require pleading, proof, and the court has to consider the same. On the other hand, in the example which I have given, on the face of it, on reading the plaint itself, it is barred by limitation. Court is bound to dismiss that suit, appeal or application, even though defendant did not set up the same as a defense. Please note 2005-6 SCC 2005-6 SCC 614. Narne Ramamurthy, N-A-R-N-E, Ramamurthy's case. The appellate court is also bound to dismiss the appeal if it is time barred, even if the respondent has not taken up the plea of bar of limitation. What is the meaning of this? I filed an appeal from the decision of the trial court. Under section 12, I am entitled to exclusion of the period during which the period taken for getting copy of the judgment and decree. On the basis of it, I have to compute the period of limitation and present the appeal within time. And that is computed on the basis of certain data, certain dates, which would be available on the reverse of the certified copy of the judgment, date on which the copy was applied for, date for supply of stamp paper, date on which the copy was ready, and date notified to receive the copy, and date on which the copy was delivered. These are the bare minimum requirements. It is on the basis of that the last date will be computed for the purpose of appeal. So a respondent in an appeal, you are the respondent in an appeal. You need not go through all those things. Can you go to the High Court office or the Appellate Court office, find out, take all the papers out and find out whether what is the date and what is the computation and all those things? It is not necessary. That will be looked into by the office of the court. So whenever I file an appeal before the High Court or any other Appellate Court, the High Court or Appellate Court office will verify whether my appeal is within time, and the settled principles on the basis of which the computation is to be made and the prescribed period under section 2J is to be computed will be found out by them. And if it is barred by time, they will the court that will be posted before court, the judge will say that your appeal is barred by time. If you want, you may take it back and that will be returned. You present along with an application for condonation of delay, whatever it is. Or if it is barred by time, still that application is not filed, the appeal will be rejected. So the appellate court is also bound to dismiss the appeal if it is barred, even though the respondent has not taken up the plea of bar of limitation. So if in the thousands and thousands of cases which are filed before the appellate court, namely the High Court for example, all throughout the appeals, all throughout the state will be filed in the High Court. The respondent in each appeal on getting the paper is not going to the High Court and verifying whether all these things are correct. That will be done by the appropriate person in the office, in charge of it, and several persons are in charge of it, and that will be dismissed, that will be pointed out to the court, and the court will say that your appeal is time barred and if you want, you may file an application for condonation of delay, and if no application is filed, the appeal will be rejected as time barred. If the question of limitation is capable of being decided on the admitted facts or proved facts, the respondent in the appeal is even entitled to contend before the appellate court that the suit was barred by limitation. The example which I gave, last date for filing is 1/1/2023. The suit was filed, the suit was filed in February 2023. On the face of it, it is barred by time. The trial court should have dismissed it, but the trial court did not, because the defendant did not appear and point out. Defendant thought on seeing the paper, on seeing the plaint, the defendant believes that the court will do in accordance with the law. Why should he go and stand before the court and plead all these things which are evident on the face of it? There are decisions to the effect that the parties may believe that the court will do in accordance with the law. So if on the face of it, it is barred by time, without adjudicating any disputed questions of fact, it can be decided that the suit is barred by time, and the trial court has not decided that question. Even the appellate court can decide it and say that the suit is barred by time and dismiss that suit on that ground. AER 1969 Supreme Court 1335, please see that. AER 1969 Supreme Court 1335. Now a decree was passed by the court in a suit which was really which was really barred by limitation, filed out of time, barred by limitation, but the suit was decreed. Either the defendant did not go there, or he went there and raised the plea but rejected, whatever it is. Suit was barred by time, admittedly barred by time, but it so happened that it was decreed and it was sought to be executed. At that time, the defendant, who is the respondent in the execution petition, raises the contention that the decree is void and therefore inexecutable. The principle is well settled that a decree passed by a court without jurisdiction is null and void. The voidability of the decree can be challenged by the respondent, by the party at any time, and even in execution or in collateral proceedings. The voidability of the decree can be raised whenever and wherever it is sought to be enforced, and even in execution, even in collateral proceedings. That is the well settled principles from 1953-54 onwards, which is followed by the Supreme Court up to date. There is no change on that principle. That the decree is void is a question which can be raised whenever and wherever it is sought to be enforced. Decree is sought to be enforced in execution or in collateral proceedings. The question is, when really on the face of it the suit is barred by limitation. Section 3 provides for dismissing the suit which is barred by limitation even though the defendant has not set up it as a defense. That is a duty of the court. Nevertheless, the court decreed it. Whether the decree is a nullity, that is a question. It is answered. These questions were raised before the Supreme Court. You see the importance of the same. See AER 1964 Supreme Court 907. 4 judges. Ittiyavara Mathai versus Varki. where a court having jurisdiction over the subject matter and the party passes a decree, it cannot be treated as a nullity and ignored in subsequent litigation, even if the suit was won barred by time. If the suit was barred by time and yet the court decreed it, the court would be committing an illegality, and therefore the aggrieved party would be entitled to have the decree set aside by preferring an appeal against it. It is not void. A suit which is barred by limitation, nevertheless the court decreed it. It is barred by limitation, no doubt about it. But the decree is not void. The court would be committing an illegality, and that could be challenged in appeal and corrected, not by way of a contention in the execution that it is void. Decree is not void. A suit which is barred by limitation, nevertheless the court decreed it, the decree will not be void. Decree may be illegal, that has to be corrected in the method known to law, that is by filing an appeal or by filing a review, whatever it is. That is AIR 1964, Supreme Court 907. There are some other decisions also on the same point. I will cite it in the next episode. Thank you very much.